You're listening to Short History Shorts audio, where history speaks louder than images. Gaius Julius Caesar's rise to unrivaled power in the final years of the Roman Republic was as dazzling as it was controversial. His story, and especially the final chapter of his life, is inseparable from the tension between reform and dictatorship, ambition and republican tradition, personal charisma and political resentment. To understand the reforms Caesar enacted and the circumstances of his assassination on the Ides of March, we have to step back into the turbulent political landscape of the late Republic, where Rome was still recovering from decades of civil war, social unrest, and the growing divide between the senatorial aristocracy and the broader citizenry. By the time Caesar emerged as Rome's dominant leader in 46 BC, the Republic had been racked by the Marian-Sullan conflicts, the rise and fall of Lucius Cornelius Sulla's dictatorship, and a string of political crises driven by the imbalance of wealth, the corruption of elections, and the increasing role of military loyalty in determining political power. Caesar's reforms were not carried out in a vacuum. They were his answer to a republic that many felt was already collapsing under the weight of its own institutions. But the very nature of those reforms, combined with his unwillingness to step back from supreme authority, set the stage for his dramatic and bloody end. When Caesar returned to Rome after the decisive defeat of Pompey's forces at Pharsalus in 48 BC and the subsequent campaigns in Egypt, Asia Minor and Africa, he came home as master of the Roman world. The Senate granted him an unprecedented dictatorship, first for a year, then for 10 years, and finally for life. While his military genius was widely acknowledged, his consolidation of political control was deeply unsettling to many senators who clung to the old republican ideals. Yet Caesar did not simply sit as a tyrant resting on military laurels. He embarked on an ambitious program of reforms aimed at addressing some of the Republic's deepest structural problems, both in Rome itself and across its vast territories. His first priority was the problem of debt, which had spiraled during the civil wars. Many citizens, veterans, and even members of the elite had taken on crippling loans. Caesar enacted laws to provide relief by allowing debtors to use property at pre-war values to repay creditors, reducing the total owed without completely nullifying obligations. It was a careful balance intended to protect creditors from ruin while freeing ordinary citizens from financial suffocation. Land reform was another pillar of his program, echoing, though under different circumstances, the aims of the Gracchus brothers a century earlier. Caesar resettled many of his veterans and urban poor on new land, including colonies in former enemy territories such as Corinth and Carthage. These colonies were not only social safety valves, but also tools of Romanization, extending Rome's culture and influence into strategic regions. By redistributing land in this way, Caesar reduced social unrest at home while solidifying Roman control abroad. He also recognized the growing administrative demands of an empire that now spanned from the Atlantic to the Euphrates. His reforms in the provinces were aimed at reducing corruption, particularly among governors who had exploited their posts to amass fortunes. By tightening oversight and standardizing tax collection, Caesar sought to bring greater fairness and efficiency to provincial rule, although many in the senatorial class resented these measures for limiting their opportunities for enrichment. One of Caesar's most enduring reforms was the overhaul of the Roman calendar. The old lunar calendar had drifted badly out of alignment with the seasons, causing confusion in agriculture, religion, and civil life. Working with Alexandrian astronomers, Caesar introduced the Julian calendar, a solar-based system with 365 days and an extra day every fourth year, what we now call a leap year. This reform was so effective that it remained the basis of Western timekeeping for over 1,500 years. Caesar also expanded the Senate, increasing its membership from about 600 to 900. While this gave him the ability to reward loyal supporters and incorporate provincial elites into Rome's governing body, it also diluted the power of the traditional aristocracy. His critics saw it as a deliberate weakening of the Senate's prestige and independence. In Rome itself, Caesar invested heavily in public works. He commissioned the Forum of Caesar, a grand new public space, and undertook projects to improve the city's infrastructure, including drainage systems, new basilicas, and plans for a massive reconstruction of the Senate House. He regulated the grain dole to prevent abuse, increased the size of the grain supply, and sought to curb luxury spending by reintroducing sumptuary laws. His citizenship policies also reflected a vision of a more inclusive empire. He extended citizenship to many communities in Gaul and elsewhere, tying them more closely to Rome's political system. All of this suggested a leader who was not content to be a mere military dictator, but who saw himself as a reformer, perhaps even a visionary, shaping a new political order. Yet for all the practical benefits of his reforms, the manner in which Caesar exercised power bred deep resentment. He bypassed traditional procedures, introduced legislation directly to the assemblies without Senate debate, and openly took on the trappings of monarchy in a state that prided itself on the expulsion of kings centuries earlier. Honours piled upon him, statues, temples, the right to wear purple, his image on coins, and in 44 BC, the title Dictator Perpetuo, dictator for life. His seat in the Senate was elevated, and he received semi-divine honours, with some even proposing he be called Rex, King, a title he publicly refused but seemed to court in substance. To his allies, these were signs of a man remaking Rome for stability. To his enemies, they were proof that the Republic was dying, replaced by personal rule. The conspiracy against Caesar grew among senators who feared that his power would become hereditary and that the old checks and balances were gone forever. Many of these men had fought with or against him in the civil wars. They were not united by friendship, but by the belief that killing him was the only way to restore the Republic. At the centre of the conspiracy were figures like Gaius Cassius Longinus and Marcus Junius Brutus. Brutus, in particular, was a politically complex choice. He had once fought against Caesar, but had been pardoned and promoted. Caesar, it was said, trusted him deeply. The conspirators called themselves the Liberators, casting their plot as a patriotic act in defence of liberty. The fateful day came on March 15th, 44 BC, the Ides of March. Caesar had been warned by soothsayers to beware the date, and his wife Calpurnia had dreamed of his murder, urging him to stay home. But Decimus Brutus, one of the conspirators, persuaded him to attend the Senate session at the theatre of Pompeii, claiming important matters awaited his attention. As Caesar entered, he was surrounded by the conspirators under the pretense of presenting a petition. Publius Servilius Casca struck the first blow, and then the others joined in, stabbing him repeatedly. Ancient sources differ on the exact number of wounds, but all agree that Caesar was quickly overwhelmed. According to tradition, he uttered "Et tu, Brute," whether in genuine shock or as a symbolic acknowledgement of betrayal, and then fell at the base of Pompey's statue, his blood mingling with that of the man he had defeated in war. The aftermath was chaotic. The conspirators had expected the people to hail them as saviours, but instead Rome was thrown into confusion and grief. Caesar's funeral, orchestrated by Mark Antony, turned into a public outpouring of anger against the assassins. His will revealed generous bequests to the people of Rome, further bolstering his posthumous popularity. Far from restoring the Republic, the assassination plunged Rome into another round of civil wars, ultimately paving the way for the rise of Caesar's grandnephew and adopted son, Octavian, later Augustus, the first Roman emperor. Caesar's reforms, many of which survived long after his death, demonstrated both his keen political mind and his ambition to reshape Rome into a more centralized, efficiently governed state. His assassination revealed the limits of personal reform in a political culture that valued shared power, at least in theory, above individual rule. Yet history's irony is that the very men who sought to save the Republic by killing Caesar ended up ensuring its transformation into an imperial monarchy. In this way, Caesar's life, reforms, and violent death stand as one of history's clearest examples of the tension between reformist leadership and entrenched political tradition, a tension that can end in revolution, whether by legislation or by the